If I introduce myself, I can say who I am not. I am not my body. I have lived my life like most people, enslaved, searching for love. First, you have to have a partner, a job, an apartment, like any slave in this world. But sooner or later, everyone feels something inside that makes them unhappy. At that moment, when I wasn't feeling happy, I started from an internal observation. Instead of looking for paths outside and following someone else, I preferred to start listening to myself. At that moment, I began to see more of myself inside and stop giving value to what is outside. So I quit my job. Then I separated from my relationship, and then I let go of the rules about food. That was the process of my liberation. I realized that it was the true freedom of the human being. With dependence, there is no freedom. If you depend on something, there is no freedom. In 2016, I started doing retreats and continue doing retreats all over the world. It goes beyond a belief. When you change from belief to belief, there is no freedom. You remain bound. Observing the participants and the retreats, I realized we're talking about an addiction and nothing else. The body functions based on stimulation. That's the biggest step, where you let go of things. That's complete freedom, until you don't need anything. First, I discovered that what you do, and normally most of the rest, is useless. Because people are distracted by activities, they don't listen to their hearts, how each one guides them, and where their hearts tell them to go. Nowadays, people are so afraid. People are surrounded by so much fear that it's normal for people not to dare to try new things. We're all so manipulated by the fear instilled in us by society, television, and the media. If you already understand how your subconscious works, you can understand that you can do activities with confidence and that they flow naturally. You can easily see, for example, arepas. I didn't know what an arepa was until I heard about it in my 30s. So I didn't have an emotional experience with it. But someone from Colombia can interpret a memory since they have childhood memories. There's something emotional there that makes you long for love through food. It's easy to observe how one seeks their mother's hug, for example, through food. You aren't born with the habit of eating. They teach you, and you get used to it, and you learn to eat. Learning to eat doesn't mean you need it. It's simple. The point is, the drug itself, it doesn't matter. Whether the drug is the egg or the arepa or wine, it doesn't matter. The main point is, why do I crave the drug? Physically, you get used to the toxins. When your body cleanses itself, you think your body needs the drug. But when you've understood addiction, it's clear. You have to understand why you want a drug. You primarily need a drug because you're unhappy. You live an unhappy, anxious life, and that's why you need more. When you live in cities, you need more drugs because you need stimulation to cope with the unhappy life you lead. Until you get to the reason that's leading you to addiction, you'll switch from one drug to another. You can go from cigarettes to food. The solution is to change your life and stop doing what doesn't make you happy. You need drugs when you haven't explored what leads you to anxiety and addiction. One has to ask themselves why they want to live in a city. What do you want from a city? It can affect you, and it affects most people. But when you're emotionally balanced, that won't have an effect. But it does affect you, because your ego is a bit unstable. If you're in your fullest self, you'll be fine. But reaching a state of being in your fullest self is difficult. Cities distract people. There's a lot of movement and noise in the city that distracts them. When a person leaves the city and goes to a place with less noise, they can begin to rethink things and listen to themselves. I would rather ask myself why I want to live in a city and what I want from the city. A person would be in the city for work, in other words, looking for money, or because of family ties. Once you let go of all those attachments, then you can live anywhere. A person without attachments, and from their essence, would prefer to live in nature. On retreats, they discover that the life they're living isn't right, and they're living a life they don't want to live. But after the retreats, most of them return to the city and to the life that doesn't make them happy, because they're not willing to change. If a person were willing to change, everything would be harmonious and easy. Cities and their technology have an impact on people's anxiety. However, this intoxication, even with food, is actually minimal compared to emotional intoxication. That is, with the traumas we all carry from childhood. For example, if you carry a childhood trauma, it causes anxiety, and that's why people need drugs. Understanding the cause of the trauma is key. Why do we seek love, for example? Does our partner believe they love each other, or believe they are seeking love from the other? The moment you apply selfless love, where the partner doesn't matter, we are partners and nothing more, that is real love. But when the idea of a partner comes up, then you seek love with expectations, and that's where the mess of today's humanity comes in. I recommend many people take an 8-day retreat to understand your mess. But you can also do it by fasting on your own. But to fast, you have to be willing to do it with patience. Observe if you're patient or impatient. If you're not at peace with yourself, your environment bothers you too. For example, when you're in a relationship, it's perfect to see if my partner takes away my peace. It's when they make me realize certain things. People should start with intermittent fasting. When you're fasting, you already have more mental clarity. You're increasingly pure, so you're more lucid. We produce melatonin within ourselves. We don't need this from the outside to be lucid. During detoxification, more clarity comes. During fasting, there's more mental clarity since the body isn't as contaminated. You're more in your being and less in your ego. Silence is important for fasting. Silence doesn't necessarily mean stopping talking, but also staying away from your cell phone, because any image you see or any comment you see on your phone creates noise. There's an inner voice that wants to communicate with you, but if you're distracted, it's difficult to hear. It's also important to observe, to become observant children again, not to analyze and judge. Observation is enough to get to the root of your intoxication. If, for example, what the neighbor does bothers me, that means it's really within me. Then I have to observe that the cause of the situation is me, not that the other person is bad. Then you can navigate this life smoothly when there's no longer a problem with yourself. But as long as there's a problem with yourself that began in childhood, where the traumas began, then it's going to be harder to be at peace. The circumstances of life outside of you are there to show you where your mental mess lies. It's beautiful how it develops. If you've understood how the game works, it's a harmonious learning process. But the vast majority are fighting against the game instead of understanding it. There is still a way out for humanity. The light at the end of the tunnel is getting brighter. Where society is going right now is like a dead end. We need change. The system tries to sell us everything artificial, like 15-minute cities, which is crazy. Another problem today, for example, is the issue of the healer. When people want to help others, they put themselves in the role of healer. One is only able to help others when they are able to get to the root of the problem. That is, when they help discover what leads the person to anxiety and emotional problems, and where they need to change their lives to stop repeating that emotional anxiety. People who want to heal must also be willing to change their lives. Otherwise, give me relief and then I go back to my normal life doesn't solve the problem. It's good to dig deeper and get to the root of the problem. Once you are free of that confusion, you will be able to see that life is beautiful and stop being manipulated. The observant person can easily spot the traps. Food, for example, is a big trap. People primarily work to earn their food. Food is later used to calm anxiety. Once you truly discover the addiction and the cause of the addiction, it's already resolved, but to get there, you need willpower. I sleep a maximum of 2 hours a day. I don't need more. Food primarily makes you sleepy. Detoxifying makes you sleepy. But it also depends on the activity you had during the day before you rest. I rest, but for me, resting is reflecting. In the morning, I reflect on the past day. I encourage you to constantly observe. I use my breaks to quickly look at the traps outside. I observe them while I'm resting calmly without judgment. What I have to do comes in the moment. I am at complete peace with myself. For me, time exists differently. For me, an hour is like a minute. A day for me is very short. I'm generally relaxed until I've finished a life. The point is that you don't have to be busy all the time. Be at peace with yourself without looking for an activity. Often, people are impatient because they want to be productive, because they want to accomplish something or do something. But in reality, you don't have to do anything. Here comes the game. Let yourself be surprised when the next game comes to you. It's already waiting for you. For that, you have to trust that you will arrive with patience. I don't have the same concept of time as most people. For example, on retreats, people start counting the hours they didn't sleep, and that makes them more impatient. But in the end, it ends up tiring them even more. When you're resting, reflecting, meditation is very beautiful and simple. It's good to have the freedom to see this reality as a game. However, most people live bitter and unhappy lives because they're doing something and don't feel it. So what they're doing isn't working, and yet they still don't have the courage or bravery to say enough. It would be nice if people had the courage to say, I'll swing in a hammock and relax, and that's it. But people still have their idea of money and all that. For example, if you relax on the beach, not much can happen, and you don't need anything.